Ready.
Hi, I'm Steve from Endless Onboard Air. This is the install video for the York 210 compressor to pump air. You have a couple of options. You can always carry a CO2 bottle, but you're going to run out. It's also poisonous, so if you're filling up an air mattress or something and it leaks, somebody might die. At any rate, we convert the AC compressor for you. If you take a look on the inside here, we plug the oil port that's designed to actually circulate oil through an air conditioning system. We don't need that. When it's converted to an air pump, that gets blocked off. So those of you that are already familiar with the York compressor and you take this front plate off and you're looking for the plug here, you're not going to see it because we do it when we have the thing torn down. The next thing is vertical placement of the compressor is the best type of position for the York compressor. It uses less oil in that position, but the bracket that goes on the 4.6 liter and 5.4 liter Ford engine for it covers 1997 through 2016. There's a few models of the 5.4 that it does not cover. I'll explain that later. But any of the Ford F-Series trucks, F-150, F-250, doesn't matter whether it's two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, it'll bolt up. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to really refer to the 4.6 liter. It'll save me having to say both. So when I'm talking about the 5.4 liter engine, it refers to both engines. They're basically the same. The bracket, you're able to mount the compressor either on its side if you wish, but you get better performance and there's less maintenance in maintaining the oil level. We do put a dipstick in it. That's what this is here. If it's mounted sideways, we've got one over here. We also have a 200 amp alternator. A stock alternator is 120 amps. We anticipate that you might have off-road lights or something like that. What makes this all possible is the pulley that goes on the end of the alternator. You're going to use your original stock serpentine belt that goes on your engine. There's just a V-belt pulley that's almost a 1-to-1 ratio to the actual clutch on the York. That means that the RPM of your engine is going to be about the same RPM on the actual unit. That prevents it from ever being able to be damaged in some way and gives you optimum performance because it is spinning fast enough. The type of oil to be used is any type of motor oil is recommended. You can use 30 weight, 40 weight, 50 weight, 1040, 1030, 2050. What I do personally is I use whatever oil that I use for my truck is the same oil I stick in the compressor unit. That way you're only carrying one little quart of oil around with you and it works for both. You're going to need some tools in order to do this, obviously. I'll cover it more in detail. You need to be able to take your serpentine belt off, your alternator. You're going to cut the oil fill tube off your valve cover on the passenger side, and I'm going to demonstrate how you can do this on the car without any debris or anything getting into the engine. If your valve cover gasket is leaking and you got to take this off anyway, then just do it when it's off the car. It's real easy. The cutoff tool that you're going to be using is, you can either stick something like this in the end of a electric drill. You can use a Dremel tool. If you already have access to air, you can use a die grinder of some kind. I'm not going to really get into mounting of air tanks or anything like that. This is actually going to be just the install video of putting the compressor on the Ford truck. You can always get one of these type air tanks. I would recommend getting one at least this large if you're going to be using air tools. If you're just going to be filling tires, you don't even really need an air tank. But it makes it kind of nice to have some kind of an air tank so you can run air tools, nail guns, and that type of thing. There's this type of air tank here that can be custom made. A V-cut can be put in it in case you need a space so your license plate can be seen. This is adjustable. It slides into your receiver hitch. As you can see, there's a number of holes on the side here, so you can slide it in to a Jeep, anything with a 2-inch receiver hitch, and you can also adjust the tank up or down, and then by flipping the receiver over, you can adjust it more. You have like 8 height adjustments. The nice thing about this particular tank is it can be made to whatever desired width of your vehicle that you want. The air inlets on the side of the tank are convex here. So if you hit like a tree or a branch or something, it's not going to break your little fitting off. When you slide it in, you hook up these turnbuckles to, it depends on the application. If you got a metal bumper, you can just hook this on your bumper. Sometimes there's a convenient hole there, and other times on your receiver hitch, there's a place to hook this where you would normally put the safety chain for your trailer, and then you just tighten these up, and you don't have anything wiggling, and it almost looks like a bumper. These can be painted, powder coated, whatever you desire on that. It comes with a built-in blowout valve, an inlet, so you can hook up your where your air hose is coming in. You can plug that in. On, what am I looking for here? On your compressor, it's going to come with a manifold. They call this a port manifold. It's basically, it gives you the ability to run compressed air to different applications, such as train horns, air lockers, a whole number of different things that you might have on your vehicle. We provide you with a pressure shutoff switch with the kit. What this is for is when you turn it on, the compressor runs and fills up your tank to 150 psi and then shuts off. When you start using the air, when you hit 90 psi, the compressor is re-engaged and fills it back up to 150 psi. If for some reason there's some type of failure, if you're not familiar with air compressors and that type of thing, that's what your blowout valve is for. In the event that the compressor somehow keeps running and overfills the tank, it doesn't blow your tank up, the blowout valve just releases the excess pressure. So what we have now is, this is the installed unit. I'm going to do a short demonstration here. You're going to see this actually in operation. And now I'm going to pull all this off, put the engine back to stock, and then walk you through step by step on how to do the install. So let's do that right now. Here's a gauge that is hooked up to the tanks mounted on this truck. This is a 1998 F250 4x4 with a 5.4 liter engine. So we're going to start this up and compress some air. Fill this thing up to 150 psi and then shut off. And we'll do a demonstration here. Right now the tanks are at 150 psi, and if we want to go up to that high pressure, it's just a matter of adjusting your valve. What makes this kind of convenient is that if you're filling up a tire, let's say, you don't even need to use a tire gauge, really. You can just adjust this down to your desired tire pressure. And when you stop hearing the air flowing in through the hose and into your tire, you know you're at your desired pressure. In running air tools, I would want to run like an air ratchet somewhere above 100 psi. We're at about that right now. We're at 120. So let's hook this up. Press this thing back on. Normally when you're using an air ratchet, you're stopping every once in a while. You're getting that bolt off. As you can see, with this type of system, there's no waiting around time waiting for the compressor to fill your tanks back up. And you can turn the pressure up higher, or you can go lower. If you want to lock in a particular pressure on this particular regulator, you can just find the pressure that you desire and push the cap in, and it's locked in at that pressure. So what we're going to do now is kind of have the demonstration. Now I'm going to pull all this off and give you a walkthrough on how to actually install it on your own truck. Okay, here it is, put back stock. Sometimes there's a cover, a plastic cover on top of here that says 5.4 or 4.6. There's just a couple of screws to take that off. A lot of the vehicles are already missing. What you're going to want to do is cut this off, and I'm going to show you how to do that without having to take this whole valve cover off. There's quite a bit of stuff that you have to move in order to do that. If the gasket is leaking and you got to take it off anyway, then just do it off the car. What you'll want to do is just push your fuel injector over a little bit. Take some kind of piece of wood or some kind of thing and stick it in here just in case your cutoff tool gets away from you. You're not going to do any damage to your fuel rail or anything. So what I'm going to do here is demonstrate how to cut that off and not get any debris inside your engine. I'm going to do that off the car. Here's a valve cover. This is what we got to cut off. What we're going to do is take a hose clamp. We're going to stick it on. Stick it on here. Probably wait for the compressor to go off so you can really clear some space for yourself. We're going to do that anyway in a minute. But to cut this off, you put the hose clamp on there because you got to have at least enough plastic left on there so you can tighten up a hose clamp on there, because we're going to put a hose on it. Here's one that's already cut. Here's how the hose originally comes. You just cut it to fit. You want kind of a sharp angle on the hose. You just want to cut it right there, and so that after it's cut off, this goes on here, and that's how you pour the oil back into your car. If you have some kind of reservations about whether that is safe or something like that, Ford's been doing this same type of thing on all their vans for over 3 decades. They run a hose up from their valve cover so you can put oil in it. All we're doing it is converting your valve cover so you can do that. And how you keep the debris, little dust that is created, because you don't want to get that in your engine. That would be bad. Here's something I can use as a demonstration because it's see-through. What you're going to do is you're going to take a glob of grease, and grease is not going to hurt the inside of your engine. Mechanics use this kind of stuff all the time in assembling mechanical fuel pumps, and they're rebuilding engines and all that kind of thing. Just shove a bunch of grease in the hole. What we're going to do is create a grease barrier. Take something like the end of a screwdriver or something and shove the grease down in there. So there's a grease barrier, and you're going to be able to tell because you're going to look down this hole. Let me wipe my hand off here. You're going to look down the hole with a flashlight, and you're going to be able to see that there's a big glob of grease there. And if there's like a little opening or something, just take a screwdriver or some other object you can stick down in there and just kind of spread it around. Just kind of push it around. Okay, well now we got a nice little grease barrier down there. Then, what you want to do is you wipe off the excess grease off of this. So we're going to do that right here. So now, when you do your cut, and you can always measure with something to make sure that you got the grease below the hose clamp so it'll catch everything. You can just use your finger when you shove it down there or whatever. So you got a nice little grease barrier, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take your cutoff tool. The Dremel tool works actually real well for this. the plastic you're cutting through isn't this thick. The plastic you're cutting through on this is really thin. This is actually, they make it out of a substance called Bakelite, but it's a type of plastic. And at any rate, when you go to cut this off, the way to cut it is not to try and do one complete cut. You want to just do some little tiny cuts all the way around above the hose clamp. And if you accidentally cut into the hose clamp a little bit, that's no problem, because the hose clamp will kind of protect the plastic you need to keep on the valve cover. So what we're going to do is go ahead and cut this off. I'm just going to use air. Actually, there's a problem with this. Okay, so and the lighting's ain't too good here, but we're just gonna make do. Okay, so that's cut off, and it's okay to put a new hose clamp on there. That one might be goofed up a little bit because of the cutting. So let's go ahead and take that off, and then what you would do is just take your finger, some other kind of screwdriver, a little plastic spoon or something, just get out as much of the grease as you can, and then just take some carburetor cleaner. This ain't gonna hurt the inside of your engine either. Now you got all the dust and the grease has stopped it. You got all that out of there, and then whatever residue that's in there, just give it a little spray, a better spray than that. But I'm going to put a rag in here so I don't make a mess, because the things that are under here, it'll be okay if you leave some small globs of grease in there. When the engine warms up, the grease is going to liquefy, and it'll just come out in your next oil change. It's not going to hurt anything, but to demonstrate, you just clean it up, and then look down the hole and make sure that there's no dirt or debris in there. Now you have this piece here. We're not going to throw that away, because that's going to go on the end of our hose. We're going to cut this hose here so that it fits on there, and then this it slides in the other end. Here's one that's already cut, and you may have to put a little lubricant on there or whatever, but it goes in there. I'd have to loosen up this clamp, but that just fits on there like that. So that will demonstrate that with the one that's actually on the car, and we'll get on with the rest of the procedure of installing this thing. So this is going to look something like this. You got this thing cut off, and you're gonna stick it on the end of this, inside this thing. Let's loosen up this clamp more. Let me grab the air hose here. I usually prefer to not shove it all the way down. That you can though, but it'll make sense if you just shove it down enough to tighten up the clamp. It sticks up just the right amount that when you're all done, you can put a zip tie on this thing, and it's right up where it's real easy to pour the oil in it. You get a little bit of lubricant here, but you can just put a little lubricant on there. Put your hose clamp on, shove it down in the hole. I usually go about that far. You'll probably have to do this with a screwdriver, unless you got air. Okay. So there, that's done. And what that is going to do is that's going to go on here like that, and that'll make sense after we get this thing on there. So let's move the stuff out of the way. Through the past years, on some of them, this radiator hose here, they removed it over to that side for you. Makes it real nice. You don't even have to take it off because it's over there and out of the way. On those models, they ran a heater hose down the side here, and then it has this weird bend that comes up and it goes down to a tube. You just have to move stuff and relocate it. You have a couple of different options. You can cut the hose and put a hose mender in there and make it longer so you can route it higher so it's out of the way of the bracket. That'll make sense once we get this bracket on here. But what we're going to do now is get all this other stuff out of our way. One of the things that we have to do is if you have cruise control, you're gonna have to remove this cable. Through the years, they used a number of different size screws that go in here: 10 millimeter, 8 millimeter, and even 7 millimeter. This one is a 10 millimeter, so we're just gonna undo that screw. Throw that in the bolt tray. This just pops off. There's like a little horseshoe shaped grooved area that it clips on this little toadstool type pin that sticks out right here, and you can just pop it off and pop it on. What I normally do is I leave that there for now, because we got to get some other stuff out of our way. We got to undo this plug. This is for an intake air temperature sensor. There's a little thing on here that you depress, and it just pops off. The little thing you're pushing down on is this little tab. You just get that out of the way. Loosen up the hose clamps, either with a screwdriver, 8 millimeter. These hoses right here, they just pop right off. And just take this, and it comes off we're going to just get this out of our way. We're going to set it over here for now. Take this, and just for right now, we're just going to shove that out of our way. We're going to undo this and just throw it over here. What you want to be careful of is this is where your mass airflow sensor is, and even some of the lube techs out there, when they're doing an oil change, they'll check to see if you need an air filter, and this will get pulled out and it'll create a vacuum leak, and then your truck won't run right. So when you go to put this back in, make sure this thing is shoved up in there where it belongs. Let's get some stuff out of our way here. Now the hose is not a complicated thing at all. Just going to loosen the hose clamps. If you have the factory clamps on there, you got to use either a spring clamp tool or a pair of pliers or something and pull that off. I don't recommend reusing spring clamps. It leaves a welt in the hose and you'll end up with a leak. So when you take those off, if you're not going to go ahead and change this hose, at least put some new hose clamps on there. So then you just take this hose off, and a little trick is if you take it off on this side first and then point it down, that'll kind of drain any coolant that might be in this hose, and when you pull this end off, you're not going to drip it down onto your belt. That'll cause it to squeak most likely. Now, after we get some other stuff taken off, this same hose, after the onboard air is installed, all you're going to do is flip the hose around and put it on backwards, and that gets it out of the way over here, and you still have a routing here. And the piece of rubber that you cut off the new hose, you're going to use that as a sleeve. When you cut that hose that goes over here, when you cut it, there's a section of hose here like this. Just cut it down the side, and then you just make yourself a little sleeve here, and that'll protect the hose from any chafing that might occur from vibration or something, and you won't wear any kind of a hole in the hose or anything from the plastic edge here. So anyway, we're going to take this off, get it out of the way, throw it over here back into the pile. Do this. Okay. Next thing we got to do is we get to take this clamp off because we don't need it. This is actually an 18 millimeter. I left it kind of loose when I had to put all this stuff together. There's no sense in really tightening it all up. This is just a demonstration thing here. Now Ford makes this is like a really cool nut. We supply you with new nuts. If you want to reuse that one with the kit, that's fine. I do. It's kind of a nice nut. The actual, if you're interested, the actual thread on all of these bolts here, this one here, this one here, and this one here, they're 8 millimeter with a 1.25 pitch. The actual nut that we give you is a 12 millimeter wrench will fit the actual nut. So we're going to throw this in our bolt tray. The next thing we're going to do is we're not going to take this belt off completely. This is a relatively new belt. There's no cracks in it or anything. I'm going to reuse it. We got to get this alternator off of here because the new alternator, if you'll notice here, on this particular truck, we're dealing with an 8-groove pulley. What that means is that there's 8 grooves. Most of the trucks that are out there, most of the Ford trucks, they're a 6-groove. If I put these side by side, it's the same alternator, it just has a different width of the pulley. That's not going to matter with the bracket because the bracket is adjustable. That'll make sense once we get this on the car and everything. So let's go back to this. You're going to need some kind of tensioner tool. If you want to attempt to use a ratchet, you can. It makes it real difficult. It's really nice if you have, here's one made by Snap-on. It's a tensioner tool, and on the tensioner, Ford did it 2 ways. They did it so that a 3/8 ratchet will fit in there, which is this size, and they did it with so that a 1/2 inch fitting will fit in there. So the fitting is already down in there on the tensioner. I'm going to use my homemade tensioner. This is basically a 16mm wrench welded on the end of a piece of metal. It's the same type of tensioner tool, only I can ratchet it. I do this a lot, so it makes it easier to be able to ratchet the tensioner. That'll make sense after I put this on there. Okay, so we're going to leave that over there for now. Now, if you have a friend to help you with this, that makes it cool. He can kind of hold the tensioner over while you manipulate the belt. That'll make sense when we go to put the new alternator on there. But in the event that you're doing this by yourself, there's a little trick here. All your tensioner tools, whether you get one from Harbor Freight or here's the one from Snap-on, there's a hole in the end underneath the this little handle cover that they put on there. There's a hole there, and what you can do is you can take a piece of rope or coat hanger or something. I use a motorcycle tie down, and you just flex the tensioner back, put your motorcycle tie down in there, and tighten it up, and that's going to hold the tensioner out of the way so that the belt is loose here, and then you can just pop the belt off like that. That's all you got to do. Then when you're done with that, this is going to come in handy when we go to put the new alternator on, because there's a different procedure of getting the belt on. So what we're going to do is we're just going to leave this connected. We're going to put this out of our way here. We're going to take this alternator off. There's 3 bolts in the back, 2 bolts here in the front. You got 2 plugs, and then the B terminal. They call it the B terminal because this big wire eventually goes up to the battery. That's how it charges the battery. I take a, let me find my favorite tool here. I've heard this tool called different things. You can do this with a small screwdriver or something, but there's a tab on the plug here. I like using this just because you can come in from the side and pull the thing, depress the little tab, pull the little tab. What you're doing is you're getting your little tool here and you're pulling back on the tab so you can slip it out. This one is kind of the same type of thing. It is easier to remove these plugs after you undo this 10mm nut that's right here. Let me push some stuff out of the way so you can see it. It's just a 10mm nut. You undo that nut, that undoes this big cable here. I've done this a number of times. I can get this thing undone there. Then take a 10mm. Normally this is tight. I just put all this stuff back on here. Now we got to undo all these bolts here. These down here, they're pretty long. They're about this long. If you're going to be doing this by hand, it's gonna take a little bit, but you can do all this by hand, with the exception of cutting this off. This is like the only thing where you need some kind of power tool. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take these bolts out. It doesn't really matter what sequence you take these bolts out at. When you go to put all this back together, you're going to find out that what you want to do is you just start all the bolts with your fingers, and once you got all the bolts actually started, then you can start tightening them down. So let's see, that's a pretty long bolt. Stick that in a bolt tray. So let's use this one over here. What you'll notice, most people that demo removing the alternator on these Ford trucks, they have you remove all of these bolts. It's not totally necessary. If you just remove the one that screws into the alternator, you can remove the alternator. You don't really need to remove these. If you have some kind of an alignment issue a little bit, you can loosen these up, and you can manipulate this little bracket back here until you can get this bolt here started with your fingers going back into the alternator. So that over there. And then pulling this out, just pull it out. Get this out of the way. Okay, now the next step, this is what's included in the kit. At this point right here, this is the best time to install this stud right here. This stud is the same thread, believe it or not, as all these bolts. You're going to put it right here. This is an alternator bolt. It went in here. This thread right here, we're going to put this stud in there. That's part of installing the bracket. This thread right here usually is a little corroded or rusty. If you have a chance to hit it with like some lubricant of some kind or something like that, that'll help on the install. If you don't know how to install a stud, what you're going to do is take two nuts. These nuts are 13 millimeter. You're going to lock them together so that they're together tight. Then to install it, you get the thing started with your fingers and you just use the outside nut to turn it in. This inside nut is going to keep this nut from just screwing down the threads. So we're going to get this started with my fingers. Be very careful in doing this. Last thing you want to do is break a stud off. Let's see. You want to screw it in there so you got at least like a quarter of an inch, just till it starts to snug up. Then to loosen it, what you're going to do is you got to take two wrenches, 13 millimeter. It's kind of the same as half inch. Put one of them on the inside nut. Let's get our tensioner tool out of the way. The next thing we're going to be doing is removing this nut down here and just pulling this whole bracket off. There's a little screw that holds this air conditioning hose on here. You don't need to mess with that. Just undo this nut that's right here and just pull the whole thing off, because we're going to be removing that bolt. So let's go ahead and do that, because it doesn't stick out far enough the way it is. If you take, let me grab the bracket. The first part of the bracket is this. And if you'll notice, actually that does fit on there. Normally you have to remove, we have to remove that bolt because the lip of the head right here sticks out. And so we're going to remove this bolt and we're going to put a shim behind it. This is just a timing cover bolt. For some reason Ford made them huge. But we're going to take the nut off, just push this thing out of the way, remove the bolt, put a shim in it so it sticks out further, and then put this bracket on. Make sure that it'll fit. That's a 12 millimeter usually. Sometimes they made it a 13 millimeter. You know, I'm gonna use the air. Like 12 feet. Looks like 10, 12. All right, so take that, get it loose, then just spin the nut off. Throw that in the bolt tray. And then this hose, just take the whole thing and just take it off and get it out of your way. This bolt down here, that's an 18 millimeter. Get used to that number. It's the same that fits on all of these. Fits on this one, and this one, We're going to be removing this one later also. Just do this by hand once it's loose. Ford just made this bolt like huge, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to use it. You take a shim that's in the kit and you just put that on there. That's going to make it so that the bolt sticks out further. And then it's kind of dark down there. Get the thing started with your fingers. Make sure that you're not going to be stripping any threads. Tighten that up. Now it sticks out the same distance as all the other ones. Okay, so now the next thing, let's put our alternator back on there. There's a different procedure for putting the belt on. When I get to that, you'll understand why you have to change the way you normally do it. Normally you're flexing the tensioner back and then just slipping the belt over the alternator pulley. You're not going to be able to do that because the new alternator pulley has this big wheel on it to drive your compressor. So what we're going to do is install the alternator. Out here, we already know this bracket will fit on there, and there's nothing else that we have to move out of the way. We're going to have sufficient clearance everywhere. You know, there's nothing in the way here. We still got to put that hose on there so you can pour oil in your engine when you have to, but you always check it, make sure the bracket's going to go on there, make sure you're not going to be pinching any of the wiring harness or anything before you put the hose on there. And then just wiggle this thing off. Get that out of the way while we put the alternator on. What I normally do is I get these started with my fingers. Let's get this one bolt that's in the back while everything is nice and loose. Just get them started. Take the other long bolt. 3 bolts are started by hand. We're not going to strip anything, so now we can just tighten all this stuff down. I usually save the one in the back for last. This is the nut that goes on this post right here. This post is not real strong. So when you tighten it up, it just needs to be tight. You can break these off with an air ratchet. So we're going to do this by hand. You got to make sure that the eyelet on the end of the cable here, where it's round, it's got to fit in between these notches here. If you get it crooked and you tighten it down, you're going to break the insulator. So get the thing down in there where it belongs, and then take your nut, screw it on there by hand, take a 10mm wrench, or we can take this and just do it by hand. You can either use a wrench or and this rubber boot, just slip that back over the thing like that. Then you got these 2 plugs, and I just dropped the little rubber thing. I'll get our little tool here and grab it. Okay, this just pops in there. That one snaps in there. Okay, so now the alternator's mounted. Now we gotta get the belt on there. Well, here's how you gotta do that. First thing you're gonna do is undo it down here by the air conditioning unit, and you're gonna slip the belt off of the water pump here. You're gonna take your tensioner tool, stick that back on the tensioner, and because I don't have any friends to hold the thing while I'm doing this, I'm going to hook this thing up, push the tensioner, take up the slack. If you're interested, Ford has plenty of holes in the fender. I just used one over here for this to hold my tensioner there. Then I got a tool that kind of makes this a little easy. There's various things you can use to get the belt on there, but the trick right now is to get this belt over this big wheel. So we just do that. Now we got to get it down around your air conditioning unit. Goes in front of that wheel, around that one, up around the water pump. I hope I didn't make that look too damn easy, but it comes in real handy if you got some kind of a tool like this. This is something I made. It can be done by hand though. Okay, then release this. Make sure that the belt is routed correctly and it's all in the right grooves and all that kind of thing, which it is. We're on there okay. Okay, so we are done with this right now. We can get this out of here. We're not going to use this hanger anymore. We got other plans for this bolt, and the way we're going to put the hose on there, you're not even going to need it. So we don't need this anymore. Bracket. Let's just make sure that, and when you're doing the adjustments and all that kind of thing, you can have these bolts, you know, here loose, and you basically got to connect it up to this stud that you put in. This bolt here, this one here. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking at this to make sure that after I tighten down the nuts on all of this, the three nuts here, that we're not going to be pinching anything. As you can see, we have a gap there. We got to put the nut and the hose back on. That takes up the extra slack there in that little gap. So don't forget to put your air conditioning hose bracket and the nut back on there. But it looks like there's not going to be anything in the way, obviously. Take this off. Take this, slip it back on. Is this cool nut that Ford gives you to hold that bracket up here. I'm just going to stick it down here. You can use one of our nuts that we give you in the kit, or I'm just going to use this. It's going to be an 18 millimeter. 18 millimeter. I think it's a 16 on that one. And that one's 18. I need a wrench to get that off. Wrench. This bolt gets removed. Of course, it's always a good idea to loosen it up enough. This will make sense later. Okay, now we're ready to put that hose on. And just kind of manipulate everything that's around here for right now. The key is just to get the hose on there. Put your clamp where you can get to it. Okay, now we're ready for that first part of the bracket. When you're first doing this, you usually have to have this loosened, but this should fit on there, just like that. Got 3 nuts to put on. So where are the washers? The washer. That's for the other. You're probably wondering why I'm not using lock washers on this. They just don't come loose. You just get them down tight and they don't come loose. Missing a washer. Stick the washer on there. This is probably the hardest part to do right here. I got big hands. If you got little hands, this is a good time for me to show you another option that you have. The York can also be mounted sideways on here. This is the same type top plate. We take this off. In case you have a clearance issue with your York, it can also be mounted sideways like this. I don't like mounting it sideways. There's just less oil consumption of the York 210 when it's mounted vertically. But anyway, that's an option that can be done. Now the next thing, we're going to put the York we're going to be using on here. And without putting bolts in it or anything, what you want to do is line the thing up with the V-belt pulley on the end of your alternator, and that's actually right about where it needs to go. But what you want to do at this point here is take a glob of clay. We throw this in the kit, and you put a glob of clay on top here and stick a little piece of cardboard on top of the clay and check your hood clearance. We got lights and everything hooked up here, so that's something I'm just not going to demo, but you can be stupid and after it's all installed just slam your hood and see if it pokes a hole in your hood. But you want to install the thing. Ford normally has this big square area right here. There's only a couple of the trucks I've run into where what I've had to do to mount it vertically is the plumbing here. I've just had to move it so that it's sticking out this way, kind of at an angle, and then run the plumbing down like this, because sometimes you get the thing adjusted and it's too high in the back here. But that's how you can check to make sure you got hood clearance. I already know that we do. So now let's bolt it up and put the belt on. Alright, so this bottom plate, that part of the bracket's all nice and secure. We got daylight between the fuel rail here and the bracket, so we know it's not going to pose any problem there. If this fuel on, I've only run into this on a couple of the Fords. I think it was an Excursion. The fuel rail came out a little bit further. In that event, all you do is you put washers behind this bracket to move the whole thing out just a little further. Just get all these started. washer. Put a nut on there. Next bolt. Okay. Put a washer in there. Nut. Okay, now, next step is to align this thing so that it's lined up with the V-belt here. What you will find on the Fords is the engine sometimes is level, sometimes it's at an angle. And when you mount this thing up, in case you don't have the bracket exactly on there straight, it doesn't matter because you can adjust it sideways and forward and back, so you can get perfect alignment with that. So now I gotta find the belt. Stick the belt on there. Okay, and then what we want to do is put it where it's lined up. I think I'm having trouble getting over to this side. Let me get over where you're at. Alright, it's got to come out. Tiny bit, something like that. Still doesn't look like it's straight. Perfect. Okay. Now it's a matter of just tightening these bolts up. This one over here on this side is a 13 millimeter or ½ inch. Now, bolts on this side are 14 millimeter, 9/16. 14, 9/16. Wrench on the side of the bolt. Okay, we've got one more bolt to tighten that's back here, but before we do that, let's just make sure that I didn't accidentally move the thing and it's misaligned. And we are still lined up. So let's finish tightening it down. These are self-locking nuts. All right. Now, to get rid of the slack, we're going to put the tensioner on. That's why we took this bolt out. So we're going to grab the tensioner, and a little thing that I want to point out, a good time to point out is during the install on this, sometimes Ford, when they cast the engine, there's a little glob of metal. It's not on all of them. This one fits perfect. If there's a little glob of metal on the cylinder head where this thing won't fit in there right, just grind down some of the bracket. Don't try to grind anything on the actual engine itself. It's better just to grind a little bit off the bracket if you happen to be one of those lucky people that have like a little extra metal that dripped down when they casted it. I need to talk about what we're doing here. We're installing this tensioner so we can tighten up the belt. We have 3 bolts. These just go in to New York. These are 14 millimeter or 9/16. The actual thread is 3/8 coarse. If you're interested. We just get those started and we leave them kind of loose. Now I got to talk about the actual tensioner, because what we're going to do is just slip this thing over here like this, and this is used to tighten the belt. This tensioner actually has some adjustments in it itself in the event that you either need to move the wheel closer or further out. When we send you the tensioner, there's a bunch of extra washers. That's not a mistake or something. These are for adjustments. So you can undo this bolt here and I'll just demonstrate with this one. If you take some of them out from the inside here, you need to have at least 2 in there. And that puts the pulley wheel further this way for a, let's call it a fine-tune adjustment, so that this pulley will line up perfectly with the alternator pulley and your York. You can also, if in some cases, it's very rare that I've run into this. It's only happened a couple of times. I've had to move this wheel out further. So that when it's on the vehicle, and this bolt here is tightened down, the pulley wheel here is further out. But this one is kind of pre-adjusted for you when we send it to you. You just, that's why we ask you how many grooves are on your alternator pulley and that kind of thing, so we send you the right kit and everything. So what we're going to do is tighten up this bolt first. This one here has to be tightened up first, and these you just kind of like leave snug, not even snug, you kind of leave them loose. You just get them started with your fingers so you can kind of move the thing around. That's going to take either an 18 or a 16. Find the right wrench here. Here it is. Takes a 18 and just don't let this putting this bolt in fool you. Sometimes you may think you have it tight, but you actually have to look at whether or not the bracket is flush against the head. If there's any daylight or a gap or something in there, or if you happen to be one of those that has like a little glob of metal in the casting or something back there, it kind of pushes this out a little further. But that's why you have all these different adjustments that you can do, so for your unique vehicle you can get the thing to line up. So that's tight. What I normally do is slide this thing over, and I just feel with my finger until it looks like they're lined up right there. And then I take a 14mm wrench or 9/16, tighten one of these, and then look at it and see if it looks like it's like everything is lined up. Yeah, once the tensioner's tightened down and everything, it looks maybe a little crooked, but the nice thing about V-belts is perfect alignment isn't absolutely necessary. But once this is tightened down and I'm looking at this, that's going to line up just right. So why don't we go ahead and tighten these. Okay. Now, these bolts here, if you'll notice, this one has a washer and this one doesn't. Don't accidentally put a washer on this bolt because you think that it's supposed to have one. If you put a washer on it, your belt's probably going to rub against it. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how you can do this without needing 3 hands. We still have our cruise control cable disconnected. That's for a reason. Take a 3/8 breaker bar. This little square that's right here, that's what that is. That is for a 3/8. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to do this with 2 hands instead of having to have 3. Take the right wrench that goes on the head and just set that thing there like that. You take the other wrench. It's going to be 16 millimeter or 5/8. This one's a bendable one. Use the regular. Okay, and usually now stick your open end wrench down in there. We're going to do the same type of thing. Usually if you tighten this one first, it'll hold this up here so you can tighten this other one. Without it slipping. Because it's open end, you can take it out. That's enough tension. We're good. Let's do a final check, make sure everything's, looks like it's lined up. Looks like it's lined up. Actually, we got to move the whole tensioner part in a little bit. Check it. Looks good to me. Okay, now let's not forget about our cruise control cable. Takes this 10 millimeter nut here, 10 millimeter screw. Let's get a almost there. All right. Gonna get this screw in the hole there. just pops on there like that. Okay, now radiator hose. Go ahead and put that on there. And what I'm going to do is put some zip ties on this little collar from that piece we had left over from cutting the fill hose for the oil thing.
Okay, time battery. Find my 8mm here.
matter of just connecting up your air hose that runs down to your tanks. Hooking up the power to the clutch now that goes through the pressure shutoff switch. And what I did on this one is you put this long 3/8 bolt in here. It makes kind of a nice little hanger, and you just pull your oil fill hose up where we tucked it down. And then you just kind of zip tie it up to this bolt up here. Figure get the kinks out. Just zip tie it up there and you can fill your oil for right there. So let's grab a zip tie here. Like that. Cut this thing off. Starting the truck up. This is the beauty in the Fords. This is a remote starter switch. This starter relay here. Called them solenoids back in the 70s and 80s. Okay, we got to put oil in this thing. We're not going to start the engine. We're just going to fill this thing with oil. Now, the way you do this, because you got to mark your dipstick, and if for some reason you overfill it, don't be too concerned. We've had people say that they put too much oil in it and some oil was coming up through the dipstick. What you can do is just you can either drain the oil out or you can just leave it in there and just put a cap on here and it'll find its way out. So did that cap, but you just screw a cap on there. The way you do this is you take a measuring cup you able to pause it again? What you're going to want to do is use a measuring cup, and you're going to fill the measuring cup up with 6 ounces of oil, and use a funnel, or if you got a real steady hand, just pour it in through here, and then take your dipstick and see where you're at on the dipstick. And the dipstick is kind of hard to read. I use a napkin. Use a piece of cardboard. It didn't work. You're not gonna be able to. You can probably see that on the camera. This already has oil in it, but you pour 6 ounces in it. See where you're at on the stick. That's your minimum mark. Then take another like 3 ounces or 4 ounces and put that in there, and then pull your stick out and mark that. Let's say that's going to be 10 ounces, total of 10 ounces. The most you want to have in there is maybe 14 ounces of oil. If you pour an entire quart in there, you're going to have oil coming up through your dipstick too. So you want to keep like 10 to 12 ounces of oil, somewhere around there. And then once you do that, you just close this up. And stick your dipstick back in there. Your pressure shutoff switch that hooks up to your clutch here, that engages the compressor. I have that working off of a toggle switch. What you're basically doing is you're taking a toggle switch and putting that in your truck somewhere. You have power going to one post that is only has power to it when you have your key turned on. That way there's no way this thing can be accidentally left on after you turn your truck off. Then the other post you run up here to your relay. Now this relay is kind of hard to see on the actual video, so I kind of made a prop here so it's easy enough to see. This is your relay. And the incoming power from your switch, that's going to go to this post. This one goes to the positive on your battery. This one is a ground. And on Fords, there's plenty of convenient grounds that you can use. This is your outgoing power that's going to go to your pressure shutoff switch, and then on the other side of your pressure shutoff switch, and it doesn't matter how you hook this up, it's like a breaker switch when it reaches the proper pressure. So you have your outgoing power going to a post on your pressure switch, and then this connects up to the wire coming out of your clutch. So we got oil in it, battery's hooked up. Instead of starting the actual engine, we're going to hook up a remote starter switch. You can also just send power to this little post right here from the battery or something. I'm just used to using a remote starter switch. It's not going to start because the key's off, but you can crank the engine. And that way you can make sure that your belts, your original belt, the original drive belt, is tracking correctly. This belt is tracking correctly. And it looks safe to me. Nothing's flying off, and it looks like you're good to go. All right. One thing I need to cover here is on the port manifold here. What these other fittings are for is so you can run other things that run on air, like train horns, air lockers, things like that. There's somebody out there that's they're selling a system of the oil and water separator that when you drain the oil and water separator, it's draining back into the York compressor. Don't do that. That is the stupidest thing that you can do. You never want to put some kind of oil and water mixture into any component on your engine. And that would be bad for the York compressor. You just want to keep oil in it. That's what you want to do. So don't do that. If you do need to mount one of these up here because you're putting a train horn or something somewhere, then go ahead and mount plumb one of these in there. Ideally, you want to have one of these and your pressure regulator that comes after your tank, your air tank. Your air tank gets drained after each use. That's how you do it in the repair shop. At the end of the day, you drain your tank. It's the best trap for oil, and you're going to have a production of water in there. So having this prior to where the air you're going to be using comes out, that's where you want it. Sometimes they put this afterwards. There's a little arrow on it, so you don't get it backwards. But you want this so that you have clean air coming out. Oil isn't going to hurt a steel tank or an aluminum one, especially when you drain it out each night. You want to get the water out of your tank, but your air tank is the best trap for oil and water. I personally don't even use one of these. I just use my air tanks as the trap. But if you're filling tires, you don't want water mixed in with your air. You don't want oil mixed in with your air when you're filling tires. And so you're going to want something to clean up your air before it goes to your tires. At any rate, I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, you can always call us. And we're going to go outside, and I'll give you a few demonstrations on it. We'll take some lug nuts off, refill the tanks, use a hydraulic jack, lift up some heavy equipment, that kind of thing. And you enjoy your belt-driven air compressor. I hope you enjoyed the video. Got it hooked up to one of the air fittings back here. We're going to turn it on and then take some look at it. Right now it's filling a 5-gallon tank, and it shouldn't take too long. It's not noisy. We can actually carry on a conversation while it's actually running. As soon as it fills up, we'll take these lug nuts off. 5-gallon tank is now full to 150 psi. We're going to start taking these off. As you can see, the compressor just now came back on, and we got 5 lugs off. So now we're going to put them back on. There's no sense in actually taking the wheel off. The compressor's already refilled up to 150 psi before we even get all the lugness up. Got plenty of air. Now if we want to jack up something that's relatively heavy, like something like this, use a hydraulic jack with it.
I gotta drive. That's ready.
Wheels already off the ground. Tank hasn't even really lost too much air.